If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, this was one of those nights that leaves a strange feeling behind. Not because the team simply lost a game, but because they lost something bigger. An opportunity, an easier path, a real advantage heading into the playoff. And the most uncomfortable part of all is that this loss didn't happen by accident, it happened by choice. The Eagles took the field in Week 18 fully aware of what was at stake. The chance to secure the number 2 seed in the NFC was real. It didn't depend solely on them, but it existed. And in January, when every detail matters, any opportunity to improve playoff positioning is usually treated as valuable. This time, though, a different decision was made. Nick Sirianni chose to rest his starters. And as a result, the Eagles lost to the Washington Commanders and missed out on the number 2 seed. And yes, the head coach knew this outcome was possible. He admitted it himself. After the game, Sirianni showed no regret. Quite the opposite. He was firm, convicted. He said he followed his process, made what he believed was the best decision for the team, and that there was only one thing he could guarantee: rest. Everything else, according to him, was out of his control. That explanation, while logical on the surface, is exactly what's dividing the fan base. Because on paper, it makes sense to want to enter the playoffs healthy. It makes sense to protect key players. It makes sense to avoid a meaningless injury in the final week of the regular season. But football is rarely played on paper. It's played in context, in moments, in consequences. And the consequence of this decision was clear. The Eagles lost the chance to improve their playoff path. Sirianni explained that he focused far more on the benefits of rest than on the risk. He referenced past seasons, talked about how resting players had served the team well before, said they treat every practice as momentum building, and insisted that he felt support from the locker room. But there's an important difference between understanding a decision and agreeing with it. Because what frustrates part of the fan base isn't just the rest itself, it's the timing, the context, the fact that even with the no 2 seed still mathematically possible during the game, there wasn't even an attempt to change course. No adjustment, no pivot. The decision was made early in the week and carried through to the end. When asked about the possibility of inserting starters in the second half, especially after the Lions-Bears result kept the number 2 seed within reach, Sirianni was blunt. He said it wouldn't be fair to throw cold players into the game, that it would put them in a tough spot, and that changing course midstream would be even worse. That argument is coherent, but it also reveals something important about the mindset behind the decision. Sirianni chose internal consistency over external opportunity. He chose conviction over adaptation. And in the NFL, that is always a double-edged sword, because there are moments when conviction is a virtue, but there are also moments when flexibility is survival. The head coach also pointed out that he was pleased with what he saw from the second-team offense, that it was good to see those players get real snaps. That in the playoffs, those are often the players who end up being called upon. And that's true. Depth matters, reps matter. But the question remains simple. Was the cost worth it? Losing the number 2 seed is not a small thing. It's not a footnote. It potentially means an extra road game. It means less margin for error. It means a tougher path through the NFC. And in January, those details tend to demand a heavy price. There's also a factor that rarely enters the initial debate, but becomes more important as the playoffs approach: emotional wear. Playing on the road isn't just about travel or logistics. It's about noise, pressure, hostile environments, and decisions made under maximum stress. Home field advantage doesn't guarantee victory, but it reduces variable. And every variable reduced in January is valuable. Sirianni acknowledged that every decision creates division. He said, half the people will agree, half won't, that it comes with the job. And he's right. Head coaches are paid to make difficult decisions. But what ultimately defines those decisions isn't just the reasoning behind them. It's the outcome they produce. And this is where the tension begins to rise. Because now, the Eagles enter the playoffs without the number 2 seed, and with a narrative already in place. A narrative that they gave up something concrete in exchange for something abstract. That they chose rest over opportunity. That they bet health alone would be enough to offset a more difficult path. That creates pressure, not just on Sirianni, but on the entire team. And pressure in January is never neutral. It changes reads, it accelerates decisions, it turns small mistakes into big problems. If the Eagles make a deep run, this decision will be retold as strategic vision, as composure, as maturity. But if the team stumbles early, especially on the road, this choice will be revisited with far less generosity. And it's impossible to ignore the historical context. Sirianni mentioned thinking back to previous years, including when A.J. Brown was injured in a Week 18 game in the past. That injury mattered. It left a mark, and it's natural for those experiences to shape future decisions. But every season is different. Every roster is different. Every context is unique. What worked before is no guarantee of success now. There's also the issue of rhythm. Even if practices are treated as momentum build, nothing replaces live game action. Nothing replaces crowd pressure. Nothing replaces real-time decisions. For some players, especially on offense, rhythm matters, timing matters, and extended rest can also create rust. It's a quiet risk. It doesn't show up on injury reports. It doesn't make headline, but it often reveals itself in the first mistake, the first mistimed play, the first stalled drive. Sirianni doesn't appear concerned about it. He said he trusts the process. He believes the team will flip the switch when it's time. And that confidence is a necessary part of the job, but confidence without margin becomes risk. Another under-discussed element is the psychological effect of the loss itself. Even with backups, losing is never neutral. It enters the locker room. It lingers into the following week. It changes the tone of conversation. And now, the Eagles head into the playoffs, coming off a loss. Even if it was explainable, even if it was planned. And that matters too. What's most striking is that Sirianni made it clear he never once considered putting the starters in. Not when the external scenario began to shift. Not when the number 2 seed became realistic. The decision was made, and it was followed through. That shows leadership, but it also shows rigidity. And rigid leadership works until the moment the situation demands adaptation. Now all of this discussion becomes secondary to one simple truth. The playoffs are here, and there's no more room for explanation. From this point forward, what happened in Week 18 doesn't matter. What matters is what happens in January. But decisions made now follow a team. They create context. They create pressure. They create expectation. Nick Sirianni bet that health matters more than seeding. He bet that rest matters more than advantage. He bet that the team will respond when called upon. That bet might pay off, but it is, without question, a high-stakes one. And when you bet high, the return has to come quickly. Because if it doesn't, this decision, defended with so much conviction, won't be remembered as prudent. It will be remembered as the moment the Eagles gave up something they couldn't afford to lose. There's no turning back now. The choice has been made. The path is set. And all that remains is to see whether this decision will be validated in the only place that truly matters, on the field, in the playoff. Because in the NFL, good intentions don't win games, and conviction alone guarantees nothing. January will answer.